Platz with Woodward. I've been with the company about 14 years now. Came from Honeywell Aerospace before that, and before that I was with Intel. Been in cost modeling, sourcing world for a long time. Started with Excel spreadsheets, like a lot of you, right? Or some, I probably see some heads still nodding here. Used a couple of AP's competitors, Sear, and then Boothroyd Dewhurst, and we've been with AP now for just over 5 years. So it's been a good 5 years. We're very happy with where we're at. The agenda for today, I'm going to talk about a couple different things. I'll give a quick Woodward overview, who we are, what we do. I'm going to talk about sourcing challenges. A lot of the stuff you guys have seen, you guys are aware of. Then I'm going to talk about something I've been pushing for the last couple of years. I call it the 4 C's. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then a couple case studies. They're kind of interesting. Glad you guys stayed till the end here. Thanks for putting me last, Rick, I guess, right? It's like, just get done with this thing, right? We're done for the day, right? So a quick Woodward overview. Powering a clean future. We're about $3.3 billion in sales last year. We're about 10,000 employees right now. 155-year-old company, 1870. First patent for the company was a water wheel governor based out of Rockford, Illinois. So that was the first patent. We got into the aerospace market in the late 30s, 1930s, and it's a fantastic company to work for. Like I said, we're about $3.3 billion. About 60% of that is aerospace and 40% is industrial. A couple of our big customers you can see on the bottom of the screen there. We're tier 1, tier 2, and a tier 3 to the aerospace market, just so if you wonder where we fit in mix. Some of our key aerospace products, actuation and controls, flight deck controls for the pilot, and a lot of different types of propulsion systems solutions. So fuel, air, oil, hydraulic, different things like that. There's a good chance if you guys flew in today, you would probably, or yesterday I guess it would have been, good chance that our systems were running that plane for you or controlling that plane, stopping that plane, making sure the fuel got to the engines, all the other good stuff with it, right? So like I said, fantastic company to work for. We've got some really neat products that we like working with. So we're going to talk about sourcing challenges. So I'm going to throw a bunch of these up here. Won't walk through all of these, but you know, supply chain disruptions. Supply chain, I think, got a bad rap after COVID, right? Do I see some supply chain folks out here? You know, it's been a tough road. Tariffs, I didn't check Twitter this morning, so I don't know what the tariff rates are right now, but they probably changed since last night, I'm guessing, right? I don't know. So we don't typically make changes to our supply chain, you know, based on a tariff. We obviously watch what's happening, right? So lead times, I don't know if there's any bearing guys out there, but the last quote I got was 99 weeks. So I got to forecast something 2 years ahead of time, right? So just putting it out there. If there's any bearing guys, let me know. Compliance issues, I talked about talent and labor shortages 2 years ago at this conference. Kind of what we were doing at that time for that challenge that we've got out there. Cybersecurity, financial, and I'm going to talk today about the long tail of low-spend suppliers. I'm sure everybody here knows what I'm talking about. You've got all these big suppliers, you're kind of your 80-20 look, and you've got a long tail of really small little guys out there. You know, what does that add to your business? What do you have to do, right? You still have your administrative burden. You still have to keep those guys qualified. You've got to do regular audits. You got contracts. You got to track the risk with them. You know, and ultimately your spend gets diluted because you're placing parts with low spend guys that, frankly, they might not be big enough to grow up and become one of your bigger guys, or you're really just diluting your spend, right? You're putting it across too many people. You're trying to manage too many people. You've got a heck of a supply chain team and quality team and everything else trying to manage this group of suppliers. So what have we been working on? We've been working on rationalization and consolidation of our supply base, really trying to get down to a number that makes sense for the products that we need. You're going to spend as much time with a $20,000 a year supplier as a $20 million a year supplier based on all the different things you must do to keep them qualified to keep providing parts for you. So I like to break it down, and I call it the 4 C's. Category of part, capability of your supplier, open capacity, not just capacity, and cost. Cost is on the end there. Doesn't mean it's less important than everything else, but if you don't have the first 3, it's not going to matter, right? I'm not going to talk to you anyway at that point. So in category, so we like to, Barton was, I think you saw my slides, Barton. We've been using an AI to look at our prints and categorize them. You look at the type of part, you look at the raw material, you look at the tolerances, you look at the part size and other things like that, special process, plating, coatings, painting, whatever it is. So we've been able to work through with an AI company to categorize our parts. When we first started doing this, we did it with an intern, honestly. He spent a year in categorizing parts. We figured once he graduates, if he went full-time with us, it would take 40 years to classify all of our, or categorize all of our parts. 40 years. What he did in the first year, we can probably do in a matter of 5 minutes at this point. So we can categorize all of our parts. Capability. So all of my key grow, and we're going to talk mostly machining here, so all my key grow machining suppliers have a digital factory built out within our API system. We've got a way that we get these guys going on that. You've got your, I'll talk about it on the next slide, but you've got your overhead rates, your labor rates, your margins, your SG&A, and other things like that. And, really trying to get those categories of parts to the right supplier so they have the capability to make those parts. Let me flip over and we'll talk about what we do. We do basically self-quoting at this point, right? Supplier digital factories. How do you build a digital factory? Equipment list, I can get that from anybody, right? I've got all these machines. You sit down, you talk about labor rates per operation type. You talk about direct and indirect overheads, SG&A and margin. You lock all that in, that goes in their digital factory. When we run a part, we have it, we've decided who that supplier is going to be, modeled based on their rates, and we kick out a self-quote. So back on this slide again, capacity, open capacity. How many times has anybody gone to a supplier and asked them how much capacity they have? I got 20% open, right? Does that help you? No, doesn't help you at all. Is it on their bandsaw or is it on their 5-axis, right? You have no idea. It's just a number, right? Supplier's trying to throw out a number that looks big enough to attract more work, but not too big that they're not being used, right? So we meet with our key digital factory suppliers every month, and we get an update on open capacity, and it's open hours, right? I have 3,000 2-axis hours. I've got 5,000 5-axis hours. We keep track of that for that month and about 6 months forward. After that, it gets to be a little of an iffy number anyway, right? And then when we award parts or we select that supplier, we cross-reference it against their open capacity. We make sure they have space to take on those parts, which to me is extremely important. If you don't do that, you might be awarding parts to somebody and then you'll find out 6 months or 3-4 weeks down the road, oh, I got to buy a machine, and the machine is stuck on a boat between here and Korea, or it's stuck at the LA dock, right? That was a constraint last year or 2 years ago, I guess, right? Unless they went on strike again. The Teamsters, not the Teamsters, the whatever they're called out there. And then cost. Like I said, we self-quote every part, machining part that we place out to the market. So it's really a 1-for-1. I'm not peppering the world with quotes anymore. I talked about this a couple years ago. We have essentially completely eliminated that whole kind of archaic process. If you're still out quoting 3-4 people, you probably need to look at what you can do differently with this tool to make this more efficient for everybody. And it really comes down to getting the right part to the right supplier at the right time, each and every time. Our first pass hit rate is better than 98%. We pick a supplier, we've got all these 4 C's identified, they make parts for that category, they've got the capability based on their tool set in AP, they've got open capacity, and cost, like I say, kind of comes along for a ride at the end. So why categorize? I'm in kind of a high-mix, low-volume world, mostly aerospace and industrial, right? I've got a lot of parts that are very similar based on different plane types, but it's obviously lower volume, right? How many 737s are they making? 40 a month, 45? I don't know what the number is this week, but we've got a lot of parts that we can categorize and put into groupings, and then you work through the whole process, and you put together a 4,000 or 5,000 hour package for each of those suppliers that basically utilizes a full machine for a year in most cases. So the question came up before about categorization. When I first started doing it, I looked at part description. Part description, right? It's a housing, or it's a cover. I'll use the cover for an example. I looked at covers. I've got about a dozen different manufacturing locations on the world. Covers. I got a cover that's the size of a quarter, and I've got a cover that's this big, right? Should I go to the same shop? Probably not. Most people are nodding no. But when we categorize, we look at, obviously, raw material, part size, tolerance, other things like that, plating, whatever, and we can actually categorize those. A small cover, a large cover, whatever it is, right? So we can really get a package of parts that make sense, that should go together, right? So it helps with the changeovers and everything else within that supply base. So our sourcing process, and this is going to be a little bit of a visual here, but use AI, we part categorize. We know the supplier capabilities, that's what's in AP. We obviously do our modeling, our self-quoting. We also pull in other data, forecast data and other metadata. We can pull up our ERP systems. We've got our supplier capacity, so we keep track of that. And then we obviously have current performance, how they've been doing the last 3, 4, 6 months, whatever. We try to put part packages together of 4,000 hours, give or take. We'll do the best we can. We obviously have the cycle time from AP. We obviously know the quantity per week, per month, per year. So we can figure that part of it out pretty easily. We try to put together a package of 4,000 or 5,000 hours, and we work with one source. We don't quote everybody, which has been, I would say, of anything, it's been pretty phenomenal, right? I'm not wasting, supplier number 2, number 3, number 4, who might be in a quote package. I'm not wasting their time anymore. And when I bring suppliers on, I said, instead of getting 100 parts to quote from me per year, guess what? You're going to get 10. But those 10 are focused on your capability and capacity and category. So you're not going to be messing with 90 parts where you're quoting something and you don't have a chance to win it anyway. So that part has been extremely important for us. The traditional soliciting and sourcing process is, again, on the bottom here, is about 75 days, about 10 weeks, give or take. We do all this in less than a week, and it works fabulously. So I'm going to talk about metrics a little bit here. I talked about the 80-20 before. This is just some rough numbers here. If you look at where we were, let's see, in 2021, we had about 260 suppliers. You can see my screen here. We had 52 that were in the top 80% of our spend, and about 207 that were in the bottom 20%. So I've got a long tail. You can imagine this on a chart. I've got a long tail of suppliers. We've been working to chop that tail down, either based on stuff we want to do, or sometimes the suppliers opt out or go out of business. We'll talk about that in a minute too. So we've been working to bring this 20% down over the last couple of years. This is one of these, you can go as fast as you want or as slow as you want. So you got to kind of work it in with other projects and NPI work and everything else going on. And then the folks winning that work are all we call them grow, digital factory suppliers. So they get all that work. If you're not a grow digital factory supplier, there's a very high likelihood you won't see anything. It's just how it is at this point. So I'm going to walk into a case study here. And this is a real case study. The names have been changed to protect the guilty, I guess. We had an aerospace machining supplier in Western Europe. They had been in business about 30 years. Privately owned company. Private equity came in and bought them. But they were supplying to a lot of the top aerospace companies out there. About 50 employees, about 25 million in spend or in revenue per year. We had about 25 different part numbers there. The part numbers we actually had there had been there for probably 15 plus years, and it was through an acquisition that we ended up with that work. And the best I can figure out, because the parts nothing was similar, right? You had little pins, you had big cylinders, you had manifolds. They didn't make rhyme or reason what happened there. The best I can figure is probably 15, 20 years ago when they were awarded something, the buyer probably said, hey, your machine shop, these are all machine parts. Take the whole thing or nothing is probably what it came down to. So I had a bunch of weird stuff sitting there. Like I said, they were a private company. We do a really good job on tracking risk profiles. We've got a software that we do that with that goes from us to the supplier to all their sub-tiers. It goes right down to the raw material coming out of the ground, basically. So we can track all of that, which is fantastic. But with a private company, finances can be a little bit troublesome to track sometimes. So not saying it was, anything that we missed. They were just a private company. We didn't have a very good directional feel on how their finances were at that point. So this is a real story. Wednesday morning, buyer's talking to him, gets a phone call. We're shutting our doors on Friday afternoon. Great. So what's your first response? If it's on the floor, ship it. Ship everything you got, right? We set up kind of a war room inside. We actually had an on-site rep that could get there the next morning, so he was on site kind of seeing firsthand what was going on. Last order shipped on Friday. All the remaining POs were canceled. Everything, they're done. They're locking the doors and they're leaving. So a normal expedited timeline, and a lot of you probably been in this world too, right? Okay, great, the doors are closed, what are we gonna do? Get together, you get your engineers, your sourcing folks, your quality folks, whoever, you get in a room, you get in that war room and say, okay, who do we have? Well, here's the list of parts, great. Has anybody else made those parts previously? In this case, we didn't have anybody that made them previously. Get those three, 4, 5 people together, you get 3, 4, 5 names for every part that's in that package of parts. So you might be sitting with, a couple hundred supplier suggestions. You got to narrow that down. You still scour the world with quotes. You send out 3, 4, 5 quotes per item, trying to get responses. You're trying to get parts quickly, and it gets me up and going. So by about week 2, you're releasing those POs. Of course, we all keep a lot of inventory on hand, right? About week 3, week 4, we're out of inventory. Just how it works in this world. Expedited quotes, week 6 to 8, typically. You're making your decisions around week 9, you get all the details put together, you're releasing POs in week 10. Let's say they were going to do an expedited 10-week lead time. We're in week 20, right? Which is not fantastic, because now you've been out of parts for, about 16, 17 weeks? You probably don't have a happy customer on my front end of the business. And, we got problems, right? We're a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of effort. So here's what we do now. We have these uncategorized parts, run the AI, we get them in categories pretty quickly, put them in the different categories. We had 4 in this case. I've got 4 suppliers selected that can make those parts based on capability, capacity, and category. We modeled for them, self-quote. That whole process is about a day. We get those quotes off to the supplier, or those self-quotes, we'll call it. We have our answers by the end of the first week. We place in POs. We've got such a good relationship. We still run out of parts in week 3 or week 4, so nothing magically happened there, but we have such a close relationship with these digital factory suppliers that, and knowing their capacity, and they run parts in the same material type. We know their tool packages that they use for the current parts they've got with us, so we know they've got the tools to make the part. We'll say we can get parts in by about week 7 or week 8 in this case. So we're back in the business. We've reduced our overall cycle time by about 60% in this case. Everybody that I placed parts with, they took them. They were perfect for their capability and capacity. So got 100% first pass hit rate. Like I said, close connection with these guys. And really, it's about 12 weeks that we were not out of parts. So when you're talking to your customer and you say, hey, it's going to be 20 weeks before I've got parts to make your system, make your assembly. If I'm saying, hey, it's like 7 weeks now, it helps with that conversation. So long story short, it worked out great. Didn't miss any customer deliveries. It was fantastic. So kind of some data on this. Like I said, but more than 95% of our machining spend goes through this process. I don't quote the world anymore. So if you're going to be a new supplier to me, you're going to be on this process, or you're not going to be a supplier, essentially. We just don't do it. If it happens, it's an oddball. Something slipped through the process. First pass hit rate is better than 98%, which is fantastic. If you just do a random quote, you might have a 30 or 40% first pass hit rate. And 100% of the folks that have been on the process, on the tool with me, are still on the platform and tool with me. So no one has ever backed out of it. And honestly, at this point, I don't expect to ever see anybody back out of it. They love what we're doing. They're only working on parts that they know are focused for them, and it's working well for everybody. Case study 2, this is one slider. This is kind of what I call the what-if scenarios. This is a 6061 T6 aluminum part. It's about a 5.5-inch bar stock that you start with, about yay big. In the upper left-hand corner there, we were looking at our parts one day, just trying to figure out what we had out there, what made sense. Looking for margin improvement and everything else, right? And we just did a what if. One of my cost engineers were just sitting there in the office one day and said, well, what if could we do an extrusion, right? We've got the, what's the application called? The bar and tube or whatever it's called, yeah. So he drew up a quick extrusion model. We modeled it, and some of the data that came out pretty quickly was kind of interesting, right? If you start with a 26, 27 pound of bar stock, and now we're going to start with a 9.5 pound piece of extrusion. Material utilization, we actually found this part because we looked at a utilization report looking at all of our poor utilization parts. The extrusion doesn't get us to 90%, but it is improved from where we were. And the interesting part here was the cycle time reduction. We're going to reduce the cycle time by 75%. So I've just increased, think about this, I've just increased my supplier's capacity by 4 times, right, on this one part. Obviously, aerospace part, we just got our customer approval from it a couple weeks ago. Parts are in production now. We'll be flying in 2026. The interesting thing with this one is the first part of the family. So I've got a bunch more parts to work on. So it's going to be fun, but it's a substantial savings. When I say substantial, it's substantial. Leave it at that. I'll talk to you about it offline, right? So quick summary here. Obviously, it's sourcing challenges, long tail of low spend suppliers. We've got a way we can work through that. I showed you an example of one that we had to do extremely quickly. They would have been on the tail end supplier list anyway, but we obviously got kind of forced to do it. But like I said, I just want to get the right parts to the right supplier at the right time. And using AP digital factories, our AI integration, everything else we're doing, it is working fantastic. Much closer relationship with these key digital factory suppliers. We've got about 25 guys on the platform in the machining world right now. We will be adding more this year. We've got to make sure we got every category, and we've got hundreds of categories if you want to look at a machining breakdown. Make sure we've got at least 1 or 2 focus guys, digital factory guys on every category. Really trying to make it efficient for the supplier. We're not just doing onesie, twosie parts here and there. Really trying to put these in packages of 4,000 to 5,000 hours. And like I said, the best supplier relationships I've ever had in my 25, 28 years, whatever, have been the guys that are on the digital factory platform with us. It takes all the, I don't want to call it fighting on price, but it takes all that off the table, right? We know what it is. They make a fair margin that's been negotiated, their SG&A, all the other things that go with it. We know what those numbers are. We're not surprised when we do a self-quote and we send it back to them and they, confirm it in 3 to 5 days usually. Most of ours come back within plus or minus single-digit percentages, which in my opinion is pretty damn good at this point. I'd love to get it perfect, but that takes just more time and effort to get to that point. So we're extremely happy with where we're at, and this is, like I said, this presentation is a little bit different. I'm not talking about the software that a lot of people were talking about what they're doing. This is how I use the software. This is how we actually have a better relationship with our suppliers by using this software. So, and nobody's required to do it. That's first step I always say. You're not required to, you're a machine shop, you're not required to do it. Well, what's that mean to me? Well, 95% of my stuff goes through this process, so there's not going to be much left to look at, right? I mean, it's just how it works.